Hey everybody, this is Canis and you're watching the DKC2 any percent theory test. Now all this is a theoretical perfect run, in quotations for sure, of what a human could possibly do to this game in a speedrun setting. So timer starts here when we hit one player and it will end once we get the final Creme coin after defeating K. Rool. Now, this video is going to be a little hard to follow if you've never seen a run before, and I can't go over every single detail, but I will try to narrate the best I can. So for the first two worlds of this speed run, you're going to be actually taking warps through every level, and most of them are developer intended, but here's an example of a glitched warp, where Diddy is holding an invisible object. When thrown at a certain place, actually immediately takes you out of the level as though you beat it. Here again though, using developer intended warps. Now a little more information about how this video was made is it's actually, every level is an individual video which was recorded by the people you see on the UI. And we kept doing these levels over and over and over and over again until we got the best videos we could possibly do. And then I basically spliced all those videos up and made it look like a single continuous run. Here comes another wrong warp. It starts with a glitched double jump as the snake Rattly. So taking that beetle, making it an invisible object which corrupts the memory and immediately takes you out of the level. And one more thing I wanted to point out is all of these levels were performed live by a person, so they weren't tool assisted in the sense that we programmed in the inputs. They were actually just performed by a person the way you normally would in a speedrun, except we kept going until we got perfection, or at least as close as we can get to perfection. So there you go, that's a 203 World 1. To give you a good idea of what that means, the best World 1 ever done by a human in a normal setting is a 206, I believe. And that is incredibly hard to get. So that just goes to show what can happen when you really work to make sure every level is perfect. Of course, this is not realistic, but still entertaining, I think, and informative as well, as you can see what constitutes really good movement. So again, going through the first two worlds, developer intended warps. Nothing too special here. There's a lot of little movement subtleties. You'll see here I do a technique called a 2-1 jump. When I teamed up there, I actually got a higher jump than you are normally allowed to do, which has slightly more acceleration than a normal jump, gets you closer to the warp barrel. Unfortunately, that fanfare cannot be skipped. It's actually the only fanfare at the end of a level that you're forced to watch, besides at the end of bosses. And I should point out that at the end of boss fights, and whenever I do a wrong warp to skip a level, you might hear some strange audio issues, like a song may repeat a part of itself. That's just the nature of me splicing together this video. Here comes the easiest level in the run, just about. Just gotta do 3 rolls. Alright, so now is where things start to get really interesting. So this boss fight is actually incredibly difficult to get right. This video was done by the runner Kryptonberry, and I was amazed when I first saw him do this. Look at what happens when he picks up this first cannonball. It's like he picks it up, and the instant he starts to pick it up, he's already hit the boss with it. And again, hitting the boss when it's not even like barely halfway across that lava pit. Now doing a famous trick called the lava fly. You're not supposed to be able to do this, but by buffering a jump in on the cliff edge there, you can survive that. Now I should also point out that the cannonball spawns are actually random. So what Kryptonberry did is he kept on doing this boss until he was able to get the perfect cannonball luck, so that he's able to even squeeze more time save out of it. But the execution of the boss fight itself was amazing as well. Alright, so you didn't actually see a coin fall down, again due to the nature of how this was recorded, but it was roughly a 5:03 World 2 exit and a 3-minute World 2 itself. Believe it or not, that is actually close to what has been done by a human before. It's the only world, I would say, where people can come close to the Theory Task's performance. Anyway, so yeah, this is when things start to get really good. No more developer intended warps, you have to actually play through each level. So the average level length goes from around 15-20 seconds to now a minute long. So you get to see a lot more cool movement using the Rhino for the first half of the stage, and that team throw that just happened right there actually stored a glitch. What that stores is called a super jump, and the next time you take damage, that was intentional, you get a lot of height out of the damage boost, which allows Dixie to soar all the way across there. It's called the Swamp Fly. Alright, coming up now is the first video submitted by our world record holder, Void, at least the current world record holder. This level is notoriously considered one of the hardest in the entire game to optimize. Anytime you just barely graze along a corner or just barely touch a wall, you're losing a significant amount of time. And when your goal is perfection, then you can't afford to hit any corners. But at the same time, every corner has to be as tight as possible, and as you can see here, Void was able to get all of these corners extremely tight. He's also intentionally skipping the DK barrels so far in this level to avoid lag. It only saves about 5 frames of lag, but it's pretty safe. So at this point though, you do want to get the DK barrel, because you'll need Diddy in the next level. This dive right here, and this careful winding is probably the hardest part of the level. So, I mentioned earlier that all of the developer intended warps are now over, but there still exists many wrong warps in the run actually, and all wrong warp really does in this game is essentially confuse the game, taking that quote from ZFG stream, but by confusing the game it doesn't know where to send you, so instead of crashing or soft locking, the game has error handling that takes you out of the level as though you beat the level. So watch this. Here begins the wrong warp setup. It involves this guy with swords here called a cutlass. Intentionally take damage from it, and yeesh, I don't even know how to explain that. Basically, if you're shooting out of a barrel, either in the left or right direction, while that sword guy is in a certain part of his animation, it freaks the game out and it just takes you out of the level. It's one of the strangest things I've ever seen in a video game, to be honest. But by doing so, you skip the entire second half of that level. This is a fun little level here, Rattle Battle. This is actually much harder to get right than you might think, because the positioning of the enemies in this level can vary ever so slightly depending on how you're moving. And because of that, you can sort of get trolled by the hitboxes. If everything isn't exactly where you need it to be, then you're going to take damage somewhere. But once you get that part down, it's essentially just hold right and jump at the correct times. Here's a new strat at the ending there by the runner Garrison. So coming up next, we have another wrong warp, but this one actually involves 2 glitches. One to get the level set up in such a way that you can do the wrong warp, so by swapping underwater there and avoiding damage, you can take damage to this beetle up here, and you get a very high jump, which has to do with you swapping while underwater. Now, take this beetle, do a very difficult beetle clash to get an invisible object, throw it just before you hit that bonus barrel, and you are out of the level. So I'm sure this level reminds everyone of their childhoods. It's a good song, a very popular song. And I bet a lot of you remember getting very lost in this maze of barrels. Of course, speedrunners are going to know the way through the maze, so it goes pretty smoothly. You're actually taking damage on purpose, which gives you the freedom to run over on those vines real quick, as Diddy, skipping a few of the barrels. Now watch closely here. See that? We actually skipped an entire barrel there, and the midway, by doing what actually seems to be frame-perfect wiggling. That saves about a second, but it's extremely dangerous. And this is called vine clip. So certain spots in the vines, you can actually go straight through them if you team throw up through them. And in order to get the height required to basically be high enough to clip through, you need to do a trick called a big boy, I haven't mentioned yet. Since this boss is actually very boring, I'll explain what a big boy is. Essentially, you team throw at an enemy, and whenever you team throw at an enemy, the Kong that you threw is going to recoil back at you. For some reason, if you jump with a certain timing as that recoil is happening, the Kong that you jump with is going to sort of get the velocity and distance of the Kong recoiling added to their jump. So you're going to get a much bigger and a much faster jump than usual, which gives you almost, I guess, twice as much height as you would normally get from a jump in order to clip through that vine. So this boss, rather boring as I mentioned. The only real tech to it is basically standing in a position so that he falls facing one direction, but as he's falling, you time it so that you get to his backside, and by throwing with Dixie facing away from him, the sort of backward motion of her hair hits him the instant he becomes vulnerable. And what do we have here? Oh my. That is an incredible World 3 time. So just to give you a rough idea, my best ever World 3 time is about 15 seconds slower than that one. And I believe even a world record is something like 10 or more seconds behind. So basically a perfect run so far. Now this level introduces the honey climbing mechanic, which is really going to separate the men from the boys in this game. There's almost no skill ceiling to how fast you climb that honey, so we worked a lot to be able to climb that as fast as we do. Now we're actually doing a glitch here called the scrolly scroll or honey slide, depending on your preference. What you do is when you're on the spider, you jump from the spider to a hook, and then from the hook back onto the spider, and when you dismount the spider again, the camera goes crazy. Something to do with the properties of hooks and dismounting from an animal buddy. But essentially what you do is you sort of surf the camera on over to the right. And that was a very, very lovely hornet hole. Target terror. If anyone can find a wrong warp to get through this level, I will pay you $100. This is probably the most painful level to play through when you've been speedrunning this game for a long time, because you have almost no influence over it. All you do is basically go through the auto scroller, and the tiny amount of tech that you can actually do to make it faster is simply jumping from one cart to the next as soon as you can. But don't be fooled. Even though this level is basically free in a speedrun context, World 4 as a whole, I think might be the hardest world in the entire run. And So first of all, that's because of the honey climbing you saw in the level before. You can lose a ton of time to that. In the next level, we have another wrong warp that is one of the most difficult to execute, if not the most difficult to execute in the run. Then a little later on, we have Mudhole Marsh, which I think is the hardest level in the game, without a doubt. And I think a lot of people will agree with me on that one. It has extremely dangerous movement, but it also has a wrong warp about 50 seconds into the level that is very difficult. Right, so here's the most important thing about this level. That right there. You need that balloon. Just trust me, you need it. Alright, so as mentioned, this next level here is going to have a wrong warp. And there's two versions of it. The normal version that we normally do in a speedrun, but this video was done by a runner named Luke, and he actually does a frame perfect glitch that you can't even see. He just did it on the corner of the wooden planks there, which, yeesh, how do I even, like, all I can really say about it is it's frame perfect. It's like almost impossible to do, but he managed to pull it off and basically turn that beetle into an invisible object off the backside of the hook guy, and uses that, thrown in a certain location, summons the bonus barrel, which is glitched and teleports you out of the level. This level here can be a little bit frustrating when you first start out in speedrunning, primarily because there's no midway barrel, and if you deviate from the intended plan, like even a little bit, then the other Kremling racer guys can be in a position where they can sort of send you backwards. You bump into them, and once that happens, not only are you losing a lot of time, you have very high risk of falling into a pit. But of course, for the sake of this video, we've gotten the perfect positioning for all of the other racers and proceed quite promptly through this level. So coming up next is that level I mentioned before, Mudhole Marsh, the most difficult in the entire game. So I'm not going to say much during this one. Just watch carefully the kind of insane platforming that you have to do just to survive here. Oh no, he's dead. Just kidding. This section right here called Eagle Pit is probably the hardest part. Again, just looks like you die, but not really. You can jump out of that water even when Diddy appears to be completely submerged. Quick camera manipulation here to manipulate the positioning of some enemies in these barrels. Now comes the wrong warp. This is actually an especially hard version. That right there was a frame perfect clash that no one really goes for in real runs, but for the sake of getting the best possible performance humans can do in this video, we decided to do it. I'd like to talk about Mudhole more, but this level is important too. So by team throwing and taking damage during the team throw, you get an extra high jump as Dixie. Then she can come up here and do a frame perfect shot from that barrel to avoid damage to the bee. And then it's just back to trying to have clean honey jumping. First half of that level is pretty commonly like underestimated in terms of difficulty. It's very hard to get the first half of this level correct, even if you're doing easier strats than the ones I just did. This is called the Ramby Death Jump. It looks like you died there, basically almost entirely off camera there. And I should mention that this Rhino section should not be underestimated either. Charging your charge attack and jumping is pretty simple, but getting that with near perfect timing so that the charge comes as soon as possible is very difficult, as well as positioning yourself in such a way that you are able to take the corners very tightly. So this boss has a glitch that was pretty much considered a meme until recently. there's a frame perfect shot you can do on the bee. And what that does is it skips one of the hits you would normally need to do in the final phase when he turns into a small bee. So here it comes. Watch, this is a frame perfect hit and is pretty position strict. So there you go. You're actually able to hit the bee on the frame right between when his 4 little buddies spawn and when he becomes invulnerable. Which saves quite a bit of time in that fight. Alright, again, no coin drop, but that was roughly correct. Yeah, that's a crazy time. My best time for World 4 Exit is 2039, I believe. So we're now looking at a truly insane run. So taking damage on purpose. It's Krypton Berry playing again. He has some very crispy movement through this level. And by taking damage on purpose there, you actually reduce lag in this level. And you set yourself up to save a little bit of time in the next level as well. For reasons which I'll get into soon. Yeah, this level is considered one of the purest platforming kind of levels. It's just rolling and jumping. But that is really the meat of what speedrunning Donkey Kong Country games is about. So it's a good test of your overall movement. They're doing a very scary roll off the ledge and into the goal from sort of a strange angle right before you fall. Now watch there. As soon as Diddy landed on that cart, the cart started moving. If you have Dixie with you, the cart is actually not going to start moving until both Kongs are on the carts. So, yeah, that actually takes more time than you might think. You lose about a half second if you land on that cart as Dixie. However, it's important to keep in mind that you do have to get another DK barrel now, which again, that's going to cost about a half second when you open the barrel because of the freezing of the animation when you grab it. So it actually pretty much evens out. So don't think that, jumping solo Kong into the cart is that big of a deal. So right here, watch. Very briefly, the animation freezes when you touch the barrel. Now this level might seem kind of weird. You're seeing what appears to be totally random jumps in the cart. I cannot explain to you why this is faster, but if you jump in certain spots, in certain ways, it saves time, and it actually adds up to a lot of time over the course of the level. This is Krypton Berry here, and he's doing this level, I want to say about 4, maybe even 5 seconds faster than someone might do if they just went through the level normally, only jumping where they feel they need to get the plus barrels. And that's all just, it's invisible time save, but it's adding up. Every jump has a purpose. Very good. This next level is by, again, our world record holder, Void. This introduces the wind mechanic, which definitely takes a while to get used to, but the wind changing directions is on a very predictable pattern, actually. Basically, it's determined by where you are in terms of left and right positioning. So because of that, he knows once he gets past a certain spot as he's going right, the wind is going to go and change to some predictable direction. Another subtlety is jumping off these hooks as soon as you possibly can. Same thing with these barrels here. Now you may be wondering why he did a team throw into the barrel. And that's just to allow him to do a faster technique for hitting this goal right here. So, something I didn't mention, it's actually been happening the whole run, is you press select when you land next to a goal, and you'll swap Kongs and hit the goal at the same time, which is very fast. But you can't do that in that level unless you do that team throw. Anyway, I'm gonna let this level speak for itself. Very impressive level to watch. Now, the actual act of going through this as Dixie isn't quite as difficult as you might think. However, getting the corners as tight as Krypton Berry is able to do here is very difficult. He's cutting every single corner very tight. And that damage boost at the end there allows him to get through the bees without taking damage. So this might be tied for hardest level in the game, Webwoods. I'm sure a lot of people have nightmares from playing this level. I certainly do. As a kid, I probably game overed trying to beat this level several times. But in the speedrun, it's still just as difficult. You basically are just going to hold right the whole time and create these platforms underneath you by pressing R and L at the same time. And the timing for making some of these platforms is extremely tight, because if you try to make them too quickly in succession, then they actually won't spawn and you'll just fall to your death. So to actually go through this part without releasing right and making all these platforms and not falling is insanely difficult. This right here is the hardest part. Watch how many things happen at once there. Making platforms, running to the right, doing difficult jumps, and shooting projectiles at vultures all at the same time. And they're taking a damage boost that you can jump out of to make that last section very, very fast. To this day, this remains the fastest Webwoods that has ever been done. Alright, Creepy Crow. This boss, most of the time save you get is on having good rope climbing, but also which location that barrel spawns in. For each of the 3 tiers of this fight, the barrel can spawn either left side, right side, or middle. And if you get the, especially in this phase right here, if you get a left barrel spawn, you're losing about 3 seconds. But if you get the right one, you can just immediately hit the bird. These ropes here are a little bit difficult to get right, but somehow we were able to make it in this video. And again, these are all the perfect spawn locations. Alright. So yeah, it looks like that was about a 7 minutes 4 second World 5, which is a great time. World 6, I think a lot of people will tell you this is actually the hardest world in the game. And it starts with this level, which is really easy to just look at on the surface and be like, oh, whatever, it's a fish. But to get these corners really tight while still charging as the fish as much as you can is actually insane. It takes so much practice to be able to do this. Cutting that corner tight, that corner tight, that corner extremely tight. Not taking damage from the starfish can be a little tricky as well. Tight corner, like every corner to get tight, you're risking hitting the wall and just losing all your momentum. Then here, by doing a charge, as the water begins to sink, the charge ends up being at a diagonal angle. And now we duck as we go off the ledge there to touch the ground, which triggers the goal to not give a fanfare, which we do not want. Remember the big boy technique? Well, we just did it right there, which allows us to skip a small section of this level. And do somewhat of a scary roll under that bee there. It's quite easy to end up going backwards in the level all the way to the bottom again. And we do a little bit of camera manipulation over here to spawn this clamp on later, which allows you to bounce on him. And then we have a super jump stored to get a lot of height from that damage boost. And the storing of the super jump, by the way, was by doing the team throw as Diddy earlier. Another damage boost. We do want Diddy to be in front here. Another little subtlety going on here is you want to jump into the wind in such a way that you're already at the peak of your jump when the wind picks you up, because jumping is faster than wind movement. This here is called Ghetto Bees. Don't ask me why. So actually, this is really a big deal. As of the making of this video, only 2 weeks ago, I believe, a new rung warp was found. Totally new. This saves a minute. And it's a huge deal. Totally changed the landscape of this speedrun forever. And that is in this level right here. And it is the weirdest thing I've ever seen. Similar to the rung warp done in World 3, where you have the sword guy. So you basically need to be coming out of a barrel, holding left or right, while the sword guy is in a certain part of his animation. And apparently that counts as beating the level. For real though, you can do that at home. It's the craziest sequence of events I've ever seen, but that does skip basically I think it's, the longest auto-scroller in all Donkey Kong Country games for Super Nintendo. That level is like 5 minutes long, normally. Doing actually some very difficult techniques in this level as well. Canceling the fish's charge and dismounting right before you get to the sign there, because going through the sign freezes all animation. And here we're going to do a 2-1 jump, which again is an extra high jump to hit an invincibility barrel, which will basically last until the very end. And you can just roll through everything, including the bees. Very satisfying. Coming up next is the final rung warp in the game, which is kind of sad because this is a really fun level to play normally. But it's one of the cooler rung warps, and these ropes that are happening right here are pretty amazing actually. It's rare to get ropes that clean. So you take this cannonball here, sort of hit the top of that guy with it, invisible object, cannon. I guess the cannon takes you out of the level. I don't know. Game doesn't make sense, but yeah. That skips pretty much that entire level. Now this is the one, again, I wanted to call it the hardest level in the game. In a way, it actually is as well. Not so much because you can die in this level, but because this snake is constantly doing double jumps, which are glitches. They're very difficult to execute. So again, that's a double jump. That's a double jump. Every single one of those is very difficult to execute, and getting all of those double jumps in one go it's going to take many hours of practice. Then it's not over though. This is our first time where we really get to use squawks, and you got to be mashing as fast as you can through this part, and you got to take all the corners as tight as you can. Doing a little camera manipulation to change the position of the red bees there so you can fly around these corners, get right in the face of these bees, and go past all those last 3 bees, and boom, you're out of there. Now this section, definitely the easiest part of the level, but you'd be surprised sometimes you see really good players lose time making those platforms of the spider, because if you're too early on your platforms, you're going to have to make an extra platform to reach the top. And if you're too late, the platform just won't spawn. So holy cow, that is a 6-minute World 6. Words cannot describe how amazing that is to me. Because like before that new rung warp, a really good World 6 would have been considered 7 minutes and like around 10 seconds. So yeah, this is the final level in the game you actually have to play through. It's pretty scary in an actual speedrun because you're just Diddy by yourself, and any damage you take means you die, which for top players means they lose their run. So you may notice I just skipped the race versus Screech, the blackbird. And to do that, all you need to do is fly over the top of his hitbox. But it can be a little difficult because if you go too high, you're going to hit the brambles. And again here, you're going to be seeing really tight corners as the bird. It even looks like you basically hit the brambles there, but with enough practice, you'll know these hitboxes inside and out, and you'll know exactly how close you can get to these corners without actually taking damage. And there you go. That's the final level in the game. So just got to beat K. Rool. Can he do it? Can Mr. Theory Task survive this very difficult fight? We shall see. So there's not too much you can do to speed up this fight, except for that. That was almost frame perfect, throwing the cannonball at the gun. As soon as it starts to suck in air. That's really all you can do in this level, is try to get those cannonballs in there the instant he becomes vulnerable. And the only one you can't really do that on is the second hit that I had just done. Just the way that cannonball is positioned, you can't really do it. But there you can see, like you hardly even see the animation of the gun starting to suck in air when you've already done the hit. By doing every single hit as optimal as possible in this fight, I was able to save about a second over, not really trying too hard to get them early. And that doesn't matter a lot. A second could mean the difference between the PB you want and the one you don't want. Believe me, I know. I had 40 minutes flat for several months, and all I wanted was a 39. Beautiful throws. So I guess now would be a good time to mention that the current world record in this game is 38 minutes and 37 seconds. And that is considered to be a truly amazing time. Currently, nobody is really even that close to getting that time. But in a setting like this, you get every single level perfect. I think we're going to be able to beat that 38-37 by a little bit. So yeah, we call this a theory task because theory is supposed to mean just theoretically the fastest time that a human could get in a run. But let's be honest, this is not even remotely realistic. Every level has been performed pretty much better than you'll ever see anybody do in an actual run. But again, this is mostly for entertainment purposes. I'm certainly entertained by this, as well as educational. By analyzing this video very carefully, you'll learn a lot about the subtleties of what makes someone fast at this game versus really, really fast at this game. So, with those purple clouds, we're getting ready for the final hit here. $37.53. Beautiful time. So yeah, I'm really happy with this video. Some good runners really put a ton of work into this. I know personally I probably put at least 100 hours into making a lot of the level tapes that you saw there. And I know of course Kryptonberry, Luke, and Boyd have all practiced this game possibly more than even I have, and so it's really a community effort, and I thank everyone who contributed to it. And also, the unsung heroes, so to speak, are the people who found these glitches and the people who've been slowly working on optimizing this route over time. I'm very thankful for all the things you found, and particularly for sharing it. It's really great that people are willing to share these secrets that they find. And that way, as a community, we're able to build a better and better route in this game. It really is a beautiful thing. So if you're interested in learning how to speedrun this game, you can go to DKC2.com. We actually have tutorials on every single level of every single Donkey Kong Country game for Super Nintendo. And I believe we're adding the Game Boy Advanced Donkey Kong Country's tutorials as well. So go ahead and check that out. Also on my YouTube channel I have an in-depth tutorial video. It's about 7 hours long, also going over each level in detail. So that one is more geared towards people who have already been speedrunning this game for a little while. But, alright, well, I'm going to let these credits roll, and I really hope you enjoy, and I will catch you all later.